today we will be talking about smart grids technology and the development of electrical cars and other stuff. So the main for what we did was we divided the group into each one's going to present four. Those people are going to present four things. We're going to talk about vehicle to grid, reliability, cost, of course cost, and economy, the benefit to the economy.
So first I'm going to talk about vehicle-to-grid technology. Vehicle-to-grid technology is a system which electric using vehicles can be connected with power grids to either deliver electricity into the grid or by throttling the vehicle's charging rate. With this way we can use electric vehicles as electric storage devices, selling energy back when in high demand. Thank you.
Okay.
Sources Wikipedia.
Can you put that in human words, please? In simple terms to everyone, without that.
Without that?
Yeah.
I explained it.
No, can you please re-explain it to everyone in simple terms? And look at us.
So, yeah, we can connect vehicles to grids with cables and stuff, and we can transfer electricity between them. And we not just transferring from grid to vehicle, from vehicle to grid too. So if we put electricity into the vehicle, we can use that as a storage thing and transfer electricity around
So
other grids.
If I'm driving, can I ship electricity from Toronto to Montreal?
Yeah, of course.
If there's a Formula One competition, you got to move left or right. So if there's a Formula One competition in Montreal and there's a lot of people there and they don't have electricity, we can fill up the trucks with electricity and ship it there, right?
Yeah, that's the point.
Amazing. Okay, next. Okay, who's next?
Go. Just get
Keep going, guys.
Go.
Guys, wait for the transition.
Just start.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about social pressure, and this is reliability. So of course, when you have electric cars, you want the system it's running on to be reliable. For example, in the flood that happened in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, tons of homes lost power and street lights went out and everything. So they weren't back for a couple of days. So this is bad for our system. So if imagine if you had an electric car and you lived in an area with no power. Where would you be trying to plug it in and get more power? It doesn't work. So this is why we need the smart grid. So now that the electric pumping stations or whatever, they're more as common as gas stations they will be. So even when it's less likely to have a power cut, so that if you're say 2 miles away from a pumping station you want to go to, there's no chance of that place losing electricity all of a sudden. So this picture is supposed to all be green, but yeah, so the darker colors, that's where this, I don't know if you can read that, but it says Prius registrations per capita. So the darker regions in USA have the most registrations, so they want the electric car, so we know there is a demand. And the second one is better, because that's basically electric car growth rates. So we expect the electric cars the demand of it to grow between the fast and the slow line. So there's going to be a higher demand in the future.
All right. Cost. So before we buy anything, be it cars or anything else in society, we always look at the expenses and the cost. And I'm going to start off with an experiment done by an Australian technology company, and they created something called Charge IQ. So this is a screenshot of the program, and what it essentially is that they created an experiment to analyze the effects of electricity from these electrical cars on the entire system. And what they found is that by using electrical cars and the smart grids, they were able to cut down the electrical cost by half. And this makes sense because this program allows users to see the transparency of how much electricity they are getting, how long it's going to last, how much is left in the system, and this allows them to make smarter choices. And also this lowers the per unit cost of electricity. Because think of it, if you are if you're a producer and you're producing electricity for 5 people, the per unit cost would be much more expensive in comparison if you're producing electricity for 500 people. So this smart grid essentially allows us to link all the demands together. And what this also does is it increases the total electricity flexibility for other things, because the wall socket in your wall is not just for charging car batteries, it's also for the rest of your consumption in your house for electricity. And my last point is that this is a more efficient method, because when you use the smart grid, what was this again? I don't remember what I wrote. Okay, it produces on demand, as if you don't have electricity stored in a place. Electricity is produced with the demand and with the consumptions, as we've seen in the curve. It goes along the lines, whereas we don't have a stagnant line, and we produce a large amount of electricity of capacity, and it's wasted.
That electric cars will also help smart grids be developed in a more indirect way due to the positive benefits they'll have on the economy. There will be 2 main ways that the electric car's greater introduction to society will benefit the economy. One is because it'll stimulate the automotive industry. As we all know, the automotive industry is definitely not doing very well right now. Detroit went bankrupt, and it was probably the center of the automotive industry right now. The automotive industry is also an important part of Ontario's economy. Windsor and other cities in southern Ontario owe much of their production and economy to the automotive industry. However, if the electric car was introduced, the automotive industry would do much better. Right? It would offer an area for increased innovation and allowing much greater competition among the different brands of cars. While right now you may be able to innovate on the wheels or on the aerodynamics to increase fuel efficiency, with an electric car, there's a whole new range of things to look at and to look to improve. There would be people looking at how to improve the batteries, making them be able to hold a charge longer, and therefore allow the cars to travel further. Some people would probably look at the charging stations. How can they make the cars charge faster and therefore be less of a hassle on the drivers? And third of all, because a large percent of the population is going to be buying these electric cars, are going to be doing it because it's environmentally friendly and that's something they find important to them. There will also be a major push on the producers of these cars to ensure that not only are they electrically friendly because they're environmentally friendly because they're electric cars, but also because their design incorporates environmentally friendly materials and other such stuff. Another way that the introduction of the electric car in a wide extent will help the Ontario economy is because of the health benefits. Right now, all the cars that use gas and are creating so much pollution is not at all good for the health of Ontario people, and that's reflected in how much Ontario spends on its health. As you can see, it's $44.77 billion spent on healthcare in Ontario, and it's one of our largest expenses. If we could even take off just a fraction of that and redirect it to creating a smart grid, then that would be a large step forward in the creation of the smart grid that would be useful for so many other reasons as well. With the electric car polluting a lot less, it is likely that we could lower the amount we're spending on healthcare and therefore better our economy. Sure.
In conclusion, smart grids and smart cars, not like the physical smart car, but cars that are smart, but are the way of the future. That's why you should invest in it. It will benefit us indirectly and directly.
Question?
What questions do you guys have?
Any questions, please
Yes,
You'll be
perfect.
the
Okay, I
best
have a
car-
question for you.
Yes.
No.
So we have been talking about this peak load and stuff like that. Okay, so you're driving all day, and then you come home and your electric car is depleted. You need to charge it for 8 hours, right?
Not that long.
How many hours do you need?
It's
6 hours?
much less than that. It's like, I want to say it's an hour.
I would say now.
Like the Tesla, it doesn't take.
If you've driven 160 kilometers?
I don't think it can drive 160 kilometers between.
No, the Tesla,
Okay.
one of the brands you can drive to 160 kilometers.
All right.
So if you have depleted, let's say it's 50, it doesn't
All
matter.
right.
If it's taking, at least the numbers that I remember were something like 6 hours, at least 6 hours of charge.
All
Okay?
right. Sure.
How does that affect the smart grid? When do you plug it in?
Okay.
Why should you do that?
First of all, there's two issues. Like, one thing is that by the time that electric cars are widely accepted, that they're probably not going to be the exact same as the cars that are being sold today. There will be new innovations, of course, and that might improve efficiency and decrease charging time. However, but in regards to your question, I think that we could also incorporate elements of their ideas into this, because obviously electric cars are just going to be one thing that rely on the smart grid among all the appliances and other things. So if when you plugged it in, maybe the car didn't start charging immediately, but would wait until but the smart grid would decide when it should start charging and for how long and at different time periods to ensure that there was no increased strain on the grid.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much. Any other final groups?
I'm just gonna start by referring to the previous group.
Okay.
So you got loads of benefits with electric cars, environmental friendly, but then when it actually comes to deploying the smart grid, there's actually loads of problems. It's not that easy. There's loads of negative things. So our group, we just have a question. We had a question assigned to us, what policies, society, and corporate changes need to be made to support the deployment of these smart grids. So basically, loads of governments, for example, the U.S., have passed laws to just allow the implementation of smart grids. But then the thing is, there's other corporate ethics and society topics and all that to consider. There's privacy, because you need to let whatever company is trying to assess your usage to determine how much electricity comes in. And there's also the constant monitoring. So loads of people don't want people to have access to how much they're using their electronics and smart devices. So there's local, there's regional, national, and international levels to consider, because this impacts environment, and also, for example, if you have an existing infrastructure already here using a normal electrical grid, like a national grid, you have to change bits or all of it. It's gonna be very inconvenient. And then cities like say Toronto, people are busy, so you don't really want to waste time to do this when you can already do you have money and you can just pay for oil and the car and all that. So yeah. And also sometimes it breaks down and it's not really that reliable yet.
Well, yeah. So I think one of the biggest advantage of the smart grid is that it's automated. So I think it's a modern thing, and it will keep improving, just like the internet. It will eventually get to it everywhere. But the privacy is a big problem. But I think under agreement, people are still. I think people are still fine, since in 2007 the U.S. government passed the Energy Independence and Security Act. So it is a new thing from 6 years ago, and they established the Smart Grid Advisory Committee and the Federal Smart Grid Task Force. Okay, so I think more policies should be taken to benefit the people that are using smart grid, because first of all, they're taking the risk of like trying out the new thing, but also it saves more energy as well as having more control of where things are going. Furthermore, and it matches the idea of sustainable environment, which is very important in today because it minimizes the waste of energy. So, and also when you think further, it's just like the startup internet. Like people are just starting it, and it is sustainable, and people are just keep deploying it. And I think it's more policy should be taken.
In terms of corporate requirements that need to be made, you need to consider the technical design of both the products and the systems in order to ensure the security of the user of the smart grid, and also the promotion of products and of energy efficiency to actually get the smart grid system going into the public and make it more advertised. Second, implementation planning. First of all, the market system model must be designed for facilitated interoperability that is also secure, so that when there's a smart meter in a user's home, it can't be accessed from people who aren't authorized, but can still be accessed by the user. And also within the corporations, they need to be able to communicate the different information that they have. That goes with energy security and with the policies that are made that will ensure that legal issues aren't encountered in terms of who is to blame if the system is hacked. Finally, for corporate requirements, the incentive to invest should be, there should be incentive that's provided by the policies and also by the corporations, not only for the corporations to invest in smart grids, but also for the customers, so both public and private investors, in order to further contribute to the cost and the resources to better the system. And that will lead to gains in economic growth and also in the security of the overall system.
So to recap real quickly how we just talked about, the biggest obstacles we face when trying to implement smart grids. First of all, communication between companies and customers. Most customers don't really understand the advantages of smart grids or why people are trying to implement them. So for example, one company, PG&E in the USA, tried to implement a large-scale smart grid, and their customers actually filed a lawsuit against it because they didn't understand what they were doing. They only saw disadvantages. I'm sorry, to what they were trying to implement. As well, there's cost planning because most companies will not have any incentive to put smart grids down because there's possibly no profit in it for them. So as Guido Bartels, the head of IBM, he's the one who said this in an interview. There's also legal issues. Do we need open standards for the smart grid to work on a huge scale? Open standards would mean that vendors could basically, in a smart grid, basically different vendors could change the sensors. The sensors used in the homes, will not belong to any specific company or vendor. Literally, it's as if all the vendors became one company, just working on smart grid. And finally, there's also policy and regulation issues. Some states in the US are not offering support or incentive, so literally companies will not implement smart grids at all. However, there is, for example, in California is offering incentive money, for example, 75 million to, I believe it's called UPEC, I forgot the exact name, to actually implement smart grids.
Alright, so currently in society, we have a high demand for electricity, because currently in our generation, mainly everything we do is based on electricity. So by implementing smart grids, we can pretty much benefit in the long term. The problems that we have for changes in society are mainly about electricity and mainly for the short term because we can't see the long term effects. But basically what we're doing is balancing the supply and demand of the usage of power, because of the electricity that we use and right now it's at a constant, so when you get to a peak demand, it's kind of you're almost wasting it when it's not at a peak demand. But the thing is, smart grids can change the way you pay for your quality of life, because in order to implement smart grids, you have to buy smart meters. And even if the government kind of covers that, you still have to pay money for it. And because now that there's a balance between the amount of electricity you're using, the electricity costs are going to vary during the day. So you're still going to have to pay, and you might not even be able to see that you're saving money. It might even look like you're losing money. And another big problem is that a lot of people in society don't trust the companies that are holding these smart grids, because now the companies have part of your information, and they can charge you extra money, or they can take your information from you. So the main problem we have to face when we make changes in society is to adapt to those changes and work around the problems that we see in order to work for a long-term effect.
Just some references we use.
Do you have any questions for the group? Okay, I have a question for you guys. For telecommunication companies, so one of the conditions that you have in Canada, at least, is they want these big companies to not be able to merge, and you have similar types of conditions for banks also. I know that in the US, there's a particular level and size of banks, so the government has to approve mergers and things like that. The reason for that is they don't want monopolies or duopolies and things like that. And I think there was an acquisition of Mobilicity that got rejected. I don't know what ended up happening with that a couple of months ago due to that reason. If we look at the utility companies and the fact that in a lot of places we have one utility company, how do you perceive policies forcing or making it more expensive for single utility companies to function and promoting the growth of new companies so that you have competition? How do you perceive those type of policies changing the world of smart grids and changing the whole scenery and how people look at the problem?
So you mean that basically with the implementation of smart grids, you're wondering what policies could possibly try to implement
So if the government comes and says, as long as there is one utility company, if that company is private company basically, they have to pay big amount of taxes, okay? And it gives incentives to new companies, to new startups to grow. So it gives those companies small tax brackets basically, so that it makes them competitive, it makes them grow, and you start having competition between these companies. Okay, so it helps promoting new companies. So that is possible in various ways, and it's a policy matter, it's a taxation matter. 50% taxes on large corporations is not a joke. That's implemented. So how do you see that changing this scenery?
Well, we were talking about the problem whether the smart grid should be an open standard, which literally means that the companies have to work together because they can replace any parts whether it belongs to them or not. So if there were policies, as you said, then the open standard would not work, and thus smart grids would possibly, depends on your point of view, but most people believe that smart grids need the open standard to actually function properly.
Okay.
So,
Try to think of it from the person's perspective. This is the question for also everyone. If you have multiple companies, okay, rather than one, multiple utility companies. So at home, just like you can get your cable service from multiple places, just like you can get your telephone service from multiple places. Imagine you can get your electricity from multiple places. What changes? Tell me in order.
Any changes in for what?
What changes for you?
Prices go down.
For the customer.
Prices go down. What else?
Incentive to purchase it would go up.
Incentive, yes. So then you have, there's incentive for them to reduce their prices for competition. There's incentive for them to improve their technology and then further reduce their costs. And with implementation of smart grids, you can technically, at any point of time, choose either or. You can put a device, let's say, that checks which one has a lower price and automate on that for your own usage. So that is the key policy change that should drive smart grids, and a lot of the other things would benefit. You mentioned a lot of concerns of society of not trusting the utility company, of not seeing those benefits right away. The clearest way to see those benefits is seeing immediate reductions in price, and that will most likely happen the fastest way by having multiple utility companies and then pushing things forward. That's the starting point, and then it leads to some of the other ways that were mentioned by Rick. Okay. Are there any more questions for the group? Okay, let's thank them again. As we saw, there are different roles that different components of the society, including people at home, including the utility providers, including companies promoting electric cars, and also policymakers and corporations. There are different ways of basically promoting smart grids. One topic that wasn't mentioned is the sheer or the issue of working hours. Okay, so a lot of the industries have working hours between, let's say, 9 to 5. Might change to 8 to 4, 10 to 6, and things like that, but a lot of it is concentrated around that. And this puts a big effect on creating, this has a big effect on creating that high peak load for power usage. Okay? Imagine having half of the population working during a different time, working 4 to 12, let's say, at night, or in the afternoon at night. So things like that would basically bring down the peak to the half, or at least change it, partially change how it looks like, to dampen a big part of the peak. And we will see that such techniques would also lead to changes in the effect on transportation, and the effect on, in some cases, cloud computing too, right? Because most of you know, if you're trying to access internet at home in the evening, if you don't have a dedicated internet service, your internet is slower. Try accessing the internet at 4 a.m. in the morning. It's pretty damn fast. So that's where you see how this working habits and how society works from, let's say, 8 to 4, 9 to 5, helps creating that peak problem. And with specifically policies and societal ways of going around that problem, changing how businesses operate, will lead to reduction of all these issues. And as was mentioned earlier, that means a lot of sacrifices. Okay, that means a lot of sacrifices. Not a lot of people like change, but change is beneficial on the long run, and it helps solve a lot of the problems. Okay, so tomorrow we're gonna be talking about. Yeah, you have a question? Tomorrow we're gonna be talking about smart transportation. We're gonna start with transportation, then we're gonna look at what makes transportation smart, and then proceed after that on Thursday with the analysis of the data from the CP24 website. Do you have any questions about smart infrastructure? Do you have any questions about smart grids and how they operate? What are the different components? Any questions? Yeah.
Does smart grids fall under smart infrastructure?
So smart grids are one type of smart infrastructure.
Okay.
And as one of the speakers in the video was saying, smart grids could be perceived as the internet of smart infrastructure, is the internet for the internet of power, because every smart infrastructure usually depends on some source of power, right? So it's the glue, as he was saying. It's the mainframe, it's the motherboard, which provides the power for all of these loads that have these sensors that they're doing this analysis and are coming up with decisions to optimize their performance. So all of these smart infrastructure elements. And another part of the glue, as we mentioned, was the communication. Okay? So smart grids also need that communication in order to get information about where the loads are, where additional power needs to be produced, where the power needs to be stored, and that bidirectional flow of the power requires the communication. Okay? So we talked about cloud computing as one example of smart infrastructure. We talked about smart grids as another example of smart infrastructure. And both of these also act as enablers for different types of smart infrastructure, including smart transportation, which we're going to start on tomorrow. Are there any more questions? Okay. Thank you all, and see you tomorrow.